I was born in Vancouver in 1987, and I've lived here nearly all my life. Anyone of my generation who grew up in the city spent their years of their youth hearing constantly about the two dangers for our future. One, a city destroying earthquake, and two, the ever rising cost of housing. Either might one day make living here in Vancouver impossible. Both dangers felt fast and inevitable, forces beyond our control. So we carried on in the face of disaster, doing our best to ignore it. In 1992, the year I did my first earthquake drill in kindergarten, Vancouver overtook Toronto as the most expensive housing market in Canada. After finishing my undergraduate degree in Victoria, I returned to Vancouver in 2009 and spent my 20s moving from one rental to another. 7 apartments, 6 neighborhoods, and 5 roommates altogether. 14 years ago, it was still possible to find an apartment for $650 or $700 a month, especially if you were willing, as I was, to tolerate a gas leak, a creepy landlord, or a solarium repurposed as a bedroom in exchange for below market rent. A few of my friends even made the leap into ownership in their 20s, almost always with the help of their family. In the early 2010s, you could get a small one-bedroom apartment or a studio for $300,000 or so. That was a significant downgrade from my parents' generation, for whom an equivalent sum would have bought a single family home nearly anywhere in the city. But it was a foothold on the property ladder. And then I believed that it would be possible for all of us to do the same, to make our homes in the city we loved. I thought we would somehow follow the upward trajectory of previous generations whose rising incomes allowed them to graduate to homeownership in due course. Besides, the market had to correct eventually, right? How could it not? With the effect of incomes and the cost of living growing. In 2012, when the average property price in Metro Vancouver was $638,000, Yale University economics professor and housing analyst Robert Schiller predicted a crash. He said, just because it's a nice place to live doesn't mean that the prices are going to go up forever. But the prices haven't stopped climbing yet. Now, the average property is 1.2 million. It goes up year after year due to low interest rates, constrained supply, investor speculation, and growing population. Year after year, I've watched my friends leave Vancouver for smaller towns, for Alberta, where they could afford a dog, a yard, a baby, and a house. In retrospect, these friends were lucky to have left when there was still somewhere to go. While we're still worrying about an earthquake, the fear and anxiety on housing has become a widespread national phenomenon in Canada. The benchmark property price more than doubled in the country between 2015 and 2022. It went from $409,000 to $871,000. In the same time period, average wages increased only 23%, not accounting for inflation. Cities large and small, from Victoria to Toronto, from Windsor to Moncton, are now dealing with the same problems. There is too little housing. There is too little housing, far too little affordable housing, and far too many investors bidding houses up and out of reach, which creates a rapidly widening divide between Canada's housing haves and have nots. Those who are fortunate enough to already own property have watched their net worth soar along with the value of their homes, even as millions of other Canadians have been shut out of the housing market. In 1986, a young adult working full time could expect to save for a down payment in 5 years. Today, the same young adult working person would have to save for 17 years, nearly 30 in Vancouver or Toronto. For decades, Canadian society has positioned home ownership as a promise, a sure path to security and prosperity. As it slips out of reach, young Canadians are struggling to build community, start families, and plan for the future. At this scale, this is not like an earthquake as a catastrophe. It is more like a human caused catastrophe. Like climate change, it's the result of policy choices, it's the result of behaviors that have tipped the scales toward disaster for decades.